What if I told you that the first chapter of the Bible wasn't just translated differently, but altered? Imagine a verse so powerful that it could change everything we thought we knew about God, forever. Stick with me, because today we're diving into a truth that could shake the very foundation of what we believe about the Creator. In this video, we're going to explore the hidden layers of Genesis. Was this sacred text deliberately altered to conceal the true identity of God? We'll take a deep dive into ancient texts, linguistic traces, and biblical passages that challenge everything we've been taught about the Creator of heaven and earth. We'll uncover the mystery behind the plural word Elohim in Genesis, investigate the erasure of divine names, and discuss the possibility that key figures were hidden to maintain a theological agenda. Prepare yourself, because what we're about to discover may change the way you view Scripture forever. 1. The mystery of Elohim and the plural form. The word Elohim is found in the very first verse of the Bible, Genesis chapter 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. At first glance, it seems simple, but the word Elohim carries profound implications. Elohim is grammatically plural. It's not just God in the singular form. It literally means gods or divine beings. This raises an intriguing question. How can God be referred to in the plural form in a book that stresses the importance of monotheism? What does this plural form actually signify, and why does the Bible use it in the very beginning of creation? Historically, the concept of Elohim in the Hebrew Scriptures is not an isolated anomaly. Many scholars have pointed out that ancient Israel was surrounded by polytheistic cultures that worshipped multiple gods. Some argue that Elohim might have originally referred to a pantheon of gods, with each playing a role in the creation process. This notion challenges the traditional understanding of a singular, monotheistic God in the early stages of Genesis. Moreover, ancient texts and manuscripts, such as those found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, suggest that the original use of Elohim might have pointed to multiple divine figures involved in creation. In these early traditions, we see references to multiple divine beings who might have acted together, overseeing the process of creation. The question we must ask is, could the plural form of Elohim actually indicate a divine council, a group of divine beings present at creation? In early Jewish mystical writings, there is a recurring theme of a divine assembly where Elohim, or divine beings, are gathered, performing God's will. Psalm 82, for example, describes a divine assembly with Elohim standing among the gods, suggesting a more complex vision of divine involvement in creation. Some believe these writings reflect a time when Israel's belief system was more open to a divine council, but later theological developments sought to refine this idea into a singular, monotheistic God. If Elohim truly refers to multiple divine beings, this could mean that the God of Genesis 1 is not the singular, all-powerful being we've come to understand. Instead, this plural usage might suggest that creation was a collaborative effort among different divine entities, perhaps pointing to a hidden, more complex understanding of God's nature. The question then is, why was this plural form used? And was it intentionally edited or obscured over time to promote the more singular image of God we know today? 2. The erasure of names in Genesis. One of the most striking aspects of the book of Genesis is the way certain divine names appear and disappear, leaving us to question their original significance. In particular, the name YHWH, the personal covenant name of God, does not appear in Genesis 1:1. Instead, the word Elohim is used. This omission is not a minor detail. It raises profound questions about how Genesis was written and edited over time. In the early manuscripts of the Hebrew Bible, including those found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, we find evidence that different divine titles and names existed. Some early versions of Genesis seem to refer to a higher divine figure who initiated creation, and this figure may have been known by a different name than Elohim. The absence of YHWH from Genesis 1:1 suggests that early editors made a conscious decision to remove this name, and possibly others, to promote a simpler, more unified understanding of God. Why would the name YHWH be left out of the creation narrative? The answer may lie in the theological context of the time. The Israelites were living in an era of great uncertainty, particularly during and after their exile. Surrounded by polytheistic nations that worshipped many gods, the idea of a singular, all-powerful God was central to their identity. By removing names that could imply a multiplicity of divine beings, scribes and editors could reinforce the concept of a single, indivisible God. This decision, however, might have sacrificed deeper ancient truths that pointed to a more complex understanding of the Creator. Another crucial point is the possibility that Genesis was originally part of a larger, more diverse theological tradition. The name YHWH appears later in Genesis, particularly in Genesis 2, but why was it introduced only after the act of creation? Some scholars suggest that the original text may have had a different divine name, perhaps associated with creation, and that later versions of Genesis harmonized this with the more familiar name YHWH to avoid confusion and maintain theological coherence. The absence of certain divine names in Genesis invites us to consider whether the Bible was edited not just for clarity but for ideological reasons. In doing so, crucial pieces of the ancient narrative may have been erased, leaving us with a story that, while profound, might not be the complete version of the truth about God's nature and His role in creation. Understanding this editing process challenges us to approach Genesis with a deeper awareness of its history and the theological shifts that shaped its present form. 3. The Divine Council and Creation. A fascinating aspect of the ancient biblical worldview is the belief in a divine council, a gathering of heavenly beings that participated in the creation and governance of the world. This concept is mentioned in several Old Testament texts, including Psalm 82, where Elohim stands in the divine assembly. The imagery here suggests that the act of creation wasn't carried out by a solitary God, but involved a group of divine beings, possibly lesser gods or heavenly beings, that played a role in shaping the world. Why is this significant? In Genesis 1, we see the famous phrase, "Let us make man in our image." The plural language of this statement has long puzzled theologians. If God is a singular being, why would He use the plural form? Some explanations point to the royal we, others suggest a reference to the Trinity. But ancient Jewish texts hint that this could be a literal reference to the divine council. In these texts, God is not alone in His creative work. There are other divine beings who are present and who assist in the act of creation. This idea challenges traditional monotheistic interpretations of Genesis. The divine council concept, once considered part of ancient Israelite cosmology, may have been edited out or obscured in later texts to preserve a more unified doctrine of one all-powerful God. If the plural us in Genesis 1:26 refers to these divine beings, it raises profound questions about the nature of God's relationship with His creation. Was the God of Genesis merely one among many divine figures? Or was He the supreme being, orchestrating creation with the assistance of others? In ancient Israel, the belief in a divine council was not unusual. Many cultures in the ancient Near East had similar views of a divine assembly, where gods interacted with one another and made decisions about the fate of humanity. The Hebrew Bible reflects some of this ancient perspective, particularly in texts like Psalm 82, where the gods are addressed by God, and in the book of Job, where heavenly beings present themselves before God. The theological implications are enormous. If God's creation was a collective effort, what does this tell us about the hierarchy of the divine realm? Does it diminish God's sovereignty, or does it offer a more nuanced understanding of how creation unfolded? Moreover, if the concept of the divine council was deliberately obscured, what truths about the nature of God and the cosmos were hidden from us? Understanding the divine council and its role in creation invites us to revisit the early chapters of Genesis with fresh eyes. We might begin to ask, what was lost in the process of theological editing, and what does the presence or absence of this divine council tell us about how we should view God's relationship to the world today? 4. The missing verse. What was erased from Genesis? In our exploration of Genesis, there is one unsettling question that we must ask. Could there have been an original verse in the text that was removed? A verse that would have clarified who God truly was at the beginning of creation. Early Jewish sources and ancient texts suggest that Genesis may have once contained a passage that was later erased or hidden from view. This missing verse might have explicitly identified the Creator, revealing the complex nature of God and his relationship to the cosmos. This theory gains traction when we examine the differences in ancient manuscripts and translations of Genesis. Some scholars point to the possibility that there was a verse between Genesis chapter 1:1 and 1:12 that described God's role in creation in a more detailed way. It could have clarified the roles of the divine beings present during the creation and explained the true identity of the Creator. Perhaps it would have distinguished between God as the supreme being and the other heavenly figures who participated in creation. Why would such a verse be removed? The answer lies in the desire to create a more unified and clear doctrine of monotheism. In ancient times, Israel was surrounded by polytheistic cultures, and the influence of these beliefs might have contributed to the decision to streamline the narrative of creation. As the Jewish people faced exile and struggled with their identity, it was crucial to present a singular, indivisible God, a God who could not be mistaken for any other deity. The original plural language in Genesis, along with references to divine beings, might have been seen as too complex or even contradictory to the prevailing idea of monotheism. The possibility of a missing verse also invites us to reconsider the editing process that occurred over time. The Masoretic text, which became the standard for the Hebrew Bible, was meticulously preserved by Jewish scribes, but it is known that changes were sometimes made to align the text with theological concerns. The erasure of divine names and titles in Genesis, like the Tetragrammaton YHWH in the first chapter, suggests a deliberate attempt to protect certain theological ideas. Ancient fragments from sources like the Dead Sea Scrolls reveal that earlier versions of Genesis might have contained different divine titles or structures. These variations show that the text was fluid and subject to interpretation and modification. If these early manuscripts included references to multiple divine figures or a more complex portrayal of creation, it stands to reason that some of these details were removed to protect the theological unity of a singular God. Could the missing verse be the key to understanding the complex nature of God's identity in the Bible? The truth may be lost to history, but the search for it encourages us to continue exploring Scripture with a sense of wonder and humility. As we seek to understand the fullness of God's nature, we must remain open to the possibility that the Bible is far more mysterious and layered than we might have initially believed. Conclusion. In this video, we've ventured into some of the most fascinating and mysterious aspects of Genesis, uncovering the plural nature of Elohim, exploring the possible erasure of divine names, and discussing the idea of a divine council at creation. We've even asked the question, could there have been a verse removed that would have changed our understanding of who God truly is? The evidence from ancient texts and manuscripts suggests that Genesis may have once been more complex than we know today. The idea of multiple divine figures participating in creation challenges the singular image of God that we've come to hold and raises profound questions about the true identity of the Creator. Genesis has long been foundational to our faith, and the possibility that it has been altered invites us to reconsider what we've always believed. Whether these changes were made for theological reasons or to preserve the idea of a singular God, the fact remains that these missing elements leave us with more questions than answers. Yet they also call us to dig deeper, to explore the Scriptures with fresh eyes, and to seek the fullness of God's nature. As we reflect on these mysteries, we realize that the pursuit of truth in Scripture is ongoing. We are invited as believers to continue seeking understanding. The mystery of God's identity revealed through His Word is not something we should take for granted. It's a journey that requires faith, curiosity, and a willingness to explore what's hidden beneath the surface of the text. If this video sparked your curiosity, I encourage you to like, share, and subscribe so we can continue to explore these mysteries together. Let's dive deeper into the Word and uncover more of what has been hidden in plain sight. And now, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Genesis was altered to preserve the concept of one God, or was there something else at play in its formation? How do these revelations about divine multiplicity affect the way you read Scripture today? Leave a comment below, and let's start a conversation about the mysteries of Genesis and the Creator. Don't forget to share this video with others who might be interested in these hidden truths. Let's continue to search for the deeper meanings and sacred truths in the Bible. Together, we can uncover what's been hidden and bring light to the mysteries of our faith.